You never had what a real leader needs to run a company. Never did, older brother.
Those were the first words out of Mason's mouth, my younger brother, 36 years old, just seconds before he officially fired me from Silver Pine Realty Group, the real estate firm our parents built from the ground up in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm Nathan Lowell, 44, and for the past 17 years, I have been the operational backbone handling zoning compliance, securing long-term municipal contracts, and quietly closing the deals that kept our company in the black. But Mason, fresh out of a Wharton MBA program and riding high after Dad handed him the CEO title, decided the company needed vision, not maintenance. As he watched me box up my belongings, family photos permit, I fought city councils to get them. He smirked as if he'd just conquered something. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just looked him dead in the eye, smiled with a slow, sarcastic nod, and walked out. What he didn't realize, what he never understood, was that I had already positioned myself to own something far more powerful than any title, the ground beneath his empire. For nearly 2 decades, I didn't chase boardroom glory or flashy job titles. I built the bones of Silver Pine Realty Group piece by piece, contract by contract, while Mason, 36, was still learning how to tie a half Windsor. I was negotiating water rights in Maricopa County, smoothing zoning disputes in Buckeye, and walking city inspectors through raw parcels of land in the dead heat of July. I'm Nathan Lowell, 44, and I didn't need applause. My satisfaction came from closing deals no one even saw coming. Mason, though he always wanted to be the face. The speaker was at development forums, and the guy was posing with city council members at ribbon cuttings. He had the polish, the pedigree, and our father's charisma. What he lacked was patience, or grit, or any appreciation for the long-game decisions that kept this company solvent when interest rates soared or permits stalled. Mason pounced when our dad, Everett Lowell, decided to step back and take an honorary chairman role last fall. He brought in a young, expensive consulting firm from New York obsessed with branding and urban lifestyle realignment. I sat through their presentations filled with buzzwords, watching Mason nod like they were gospel while I quietly reviewed construction delays on our largest multifamily project in Chandler. He started shifting key staff and moved Teresa, our compliance lead, into business culture. He cut 2 project managers I'd hired personally. And each time I voiced concern, he'd flash that PR smile and say, "This is what evolution looks like, Nathan." I should have known the hammer was coming. The signs weren't subtle. He'd stopped looping me into strategic planning. Vendor contracts started getting rerouted. Even my parking spot was reassigned to the new chief brand architect, a 29-year-old with a nose ring and a Tesla. Still, I stayed, quiet, watching, letting him believe I was fading into irrelevance. Mason didn't realize that while he was chasing optics and optics alone, I'd been investing in the one thing that doesn't lose value when markets crash land. And soon, that would be the only thing keeping his shiny empire from collapsing. 3 years before Mason's hostile glow-up into CEO, I had lunch with our father at the Cactus Table, an old steakhouse off Camelback Road we'd been going to since I was a teenager. It was one of those rare afternoons when he wasn't glued to his phone or chasing down a city council vote. He was in a reflective mood that day, slower, quieter. Somewhere between the prime rib and his second bourbon, he leaned in and said, "Nathan, buildings come and go. But land? Land is forever. That's the play if you want to sleep at night." At the time, I didn't fully understand the urgency behind those words. But a week later, while reviewing portfolio risk metrics, something clicked. Over half of Silver Pine's most profitable developments, multi-use builds in Chandler, Gilbert, and Tempe, stood on leased land. The lease terms were generous, sure, but they had expiration windows. And the original landowners? Aging out fast. So I made a move, not as a Lowell or VP of operations, but as a private investor. I created Lowell Terrain Holdings LLC, and started making discreet offers to purchase the land beneath those buildings. No silver pine letterhead, no noise, just clean transactions with long-term vision. By the end of that fiscal year, I owned the dirt under our most high-performing mixed-use properties. With each acquisition, I ensured Silverpine retained favorable 5-year lease agreements, complete with renewal clauses that would quietly expire just months after my brother's crowning. I didn't gloat. I didn't even tell Dad until the ink was dry. When I finally handed him the folder, he adjusted his glasses, looked at the deeds, and muttered, "Smart. You always did see around corners." Conversely, Mason never read the fine print, never bothered with back-end property summaries or lease structures. He wanted applause, not architecture. But someday, I knew he'd come face to face with a truth he couldn't PR his way out of. Without the land, the buildings are just decoration. By the time Mason officially became CEO of Silverpine Realty Group, the shift had already begun, quiet but undeniable. I haven't looped in on meetings anymore. My budget proposal sat in limbo. Entire project briefs that used to cross my desk now skipped past me to some freshly hired director of strategic synergies. No one said it outright, but I could feel it. The exile had started. It wasn't personal, Mason would say. We're just evolving the brand. But it was personal. It always had been. One afternoon, I walked into the Mesa site trailer, our biggest residential development to date, and found my name stripped from the project binder. I asked Alan, our site manager, what happened. He just gave me a shrug and muttered, "Orders came from corporate." Then came the cuts, no layoffs, just quiet removals. Teresa, who'd been with us for 11 years, was suddenly transitioned to a remote compliance role in a department that didn't exist 3 months ago. Carlos, one of our most loyal maintenance leads, was told his unit was outsourced to a third-party vendor. Each change was cloaked in language like efficiency, alignment, and brand cohesion. But I knew what it was. Consolidation of power, a purge of everything tied to my leadership. Even my email signature was altered, senior operations advisor replaced with project liaison. My office got downsized to a corner nook across from the copier. No windows, no respect. The final insult? My security badge stopped working on the executive floor. I didn't complain. I didn't resist. I just observed. Every detail mattered. Mason focused on digital ad campaigns and social influencer partnerships to modernize our real estate image. Meanwhile, I was monitoring lease expiration timelines and easement rights, quietly preparing for the moment when control would swing in my direction. Every morning, I still woke at 5:15, reviewed occupancy reports, and sent notes on capital expenditures, knowing they might be ignored but doing it anyway. Not for Mason, for the company, for the people, for the foundation my parents laid. Because Mason may have held the title, but titles don't pay rent, land does. And soon the only ground he'd be standing on was the ground he was unknowingly leasing from me. 2 mornings after I was fired, I got a text from Dad. Just 3 words. Breakfast. 7:30. Harlow's. Harlow's Diner was a dusty old spot tucked behind a gas station off East Shea Boulevard, our go-to place back when Mason and I were teenagers. We hadn't been there together in over a decade. When I walked in, Dad was already seated in the corner booth, sipping his usual black coffee, tie loose, eyes tired. He didn't even look up when I slid into the seat across from him. "He told me yesterday," he muttered, "said it was strategic, clean-cut, forward-facing. His voice was too flat for a man whose oldest son had just been gutted from the family company. "You let it happen," I said, not as an accusation but as a fact. He sighed, long and heavy. "Mason's the CEO now. My hands are off the wheel. That's what stepping back means." "No," I replied. "That's what looking the other way means." We mainly ate in silence. He ordered blueberry pancakes like always. I had black coffee and eggs, but barely touched them. When the waitress refilled his cup, he finally leaned in and asked, "He doesn't know about the leases, does he?" I shook my head. He never read the full property portfolios. He thought Lowell Terrain Holdings was just another shell vendor. Dad nodded slowly. 3 months, he said. 3 months. I confirmed. That's when the renewal options expire, and this time, there wouldn't be any generous rollover clauses. Market rate only. No discounts, no exceptions. He ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking every bit his 72 years. That'll hit them hard, he murmured. Operating costs will spike overnight. I looked him dead in the eyes. That's not my problem anymore. For a moment, I thought he might defend Mason, say something fatherly, like he's young, or he'll learn. Instead, he just stared out the window, watching a landscaper trim the hedges out front. You always handled the roots, he finally said. Mason just polished the leaves. He stood, tossed a 20 on the table, and touched my shoulder before walking out. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't approval. It was a quiet acknowledgement of the truth. He had chosen the wrong son to trust with the future. It started with a voicemail. Mason's voice, tight and unusually clipped. Nathan, we need to talk. There are gaps in the property records. Some key documents aren't in the shared drive. Call me back. No apology. There was no hint that he'd fired me less than 2 weeks prior, just damage control pure and simple. I didn't return the call. That afternoon, he showed up unannounced at my condo in Paradise Valley, pounding on the glass door like a process server. I opened it just wide enough for his face to register my calm. He didn't wait to be invited in. He pushed past me, pacing in his Cole Haan loafers like a caged executive. You're ignoring me, he snapped. I respect your decision to remove me from company business, I replied, still holding my coffee. He started rattling off demands, vendor contracts, permit logs, utility plans, and long-term maintenance projections. His so-called chief brand architect couldn't make sense of the filing system, and project timelines were slipping. Lease details were missing. West Chandler's insurance needed clarification. I let him talk. Then I said, everything's on the server, indexed by parcel, project code, and phase. Like always. Mason's eyes narrowed. Your folder names are ridiculous. No one can find anything. I smiled faintly. You hired a team to reinvent our public image. Maybe they should have started with internal literacy. He looked like he wanted to throw something. Instead, he straightened his shirt cuffs and said, Legal will be in touch. Let them, I said, opening the door for him to leave. By the time he stomped out, his ears were red and his pride was cracked. That was the moment it began the unraveling. Because while he was chasing headlines and hashtags, he had built everything atop land he didn't truly own and never even noticed he'd leased from me. 3 days later, it wasn't Mason who contacted me, it was Silverpine's insurance provider, requesting urgent clarification regarding ownership status on 4 of our flagship sites, West Chandler, Gilbert Crossings, the Bluffs in Tempe, and the newest jewel in the portfolio Desert Crest Commons in Queen Creek. Apparently, Mason had tried to update the policies and hit a big wall. My name was on the deeds, not Silverpine's. I forwarded the email to my attorney without saying a word. The next morning, my phone rang at 6:42 a.m. Dad, did you know Mason doesn't read legal documents? He asked, voice sharp with tension. Yes, I said. He just found out the company doesn't own the land under its 4 highest revenue developments, he said. He's losing it. I'm sure he is. A long pause. He's called an emergency board meeting tomorrow. Says you've been hiding critical information from the company. Nothing was hidden, I replied, walking to the window with my coffee. Every lease is properly filed. Every payment is tracked. Lowell Terrain Holdings has been billing Silverpine monthly for 5 years. All approved. Hold on, Dad said. You've been collecting rent from the company? I raised an eyebrow. Yes. Mason signed every approval without realizing he was paying his older brother. Check the memo lines. BK Holdings is just the operational arm of Lowell Terrain. It's all there. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Finally, Dad exhaled. Jesus Christ. Don't take the Lord's name in vain, Dad. You're the one who told me to invest in land. That afternoon, I got a formal legal request from Silver Pines Council, asking for complete transparency and documentation regarding all lease arrangements between Lowell Terrain Holdings and Silver Pine Realty Group. My lawyer responded with a zip file of every contract, invoice, and time-stamped communication, plus a polite reminder that personal strategy was not subject to internal audit unless fraud was suspected. And there was no fraud, only oversight on their part. The calls started from former team members Carlos, Teresa, and even Alan from the Mesa project. The new efficiency consultant Mason had hired was slashing hours, replacing longtime vendors with cheap startups, and pushing timeline cuts that ignored permitting constraints. Morale was tanking. So was trust. Then came the kicker. A junior analyst accidentally CC'd me on an internal email chain where Mason and his executive team were scrambling to evaluate potential leverage options over the land parcels in question. One reply stood out. Can we challenge ownership, file for adverse possession, maybe reclassify as company held through historical use? It would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. They were drowning in their arrogance, trying to claw back something they never bothered to understand legally. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The bomb had already dropped. They had just discovered the truth, and it was written into the foundation of every one of their most profitable properties. I owned the ground beneath everything they stood on. The funny thing is, I wasn't even looking for it. I was at the Maricopa County Recorder's office that Thursday, pulling parcel records to prepare for potential land acquisition near Rio Verde, when I stumbled across a name that didn't belong. ML. Vision Development LLC. It was listed on a commercial zoning application for a proposed luxury hotel complex just outside the perimeter of our Highline District project in North Scottsdale. I narrowed my eyes. The initials didn't click right away. But the principal listed on the paperwork? Mason Lowell. I ran the LLC through the Arizona Corporation Commission database. There it was Mason, as the sole managing member, using his address, not Silver Pines. Within 10 minutes, I'd uncovered 2 more permit applications, one in South Tempe, another near Gilbert Crossings, each within a mile of our most profitable Silver Pine holdings. Every project was designed to mirror what we were already operating: high-end, mixed-use urban spaces with boutique retail, luxury residential, and commercial flex components. The branding language? Nearly identical to Silver Pines. Even the projected timelines and investor decks, which I accessed through a backdoor email alias linked to his Wharton alumni network, spoke openly about leveraging legacy operational insights and targeting emerging suburban cores previously underutilized by legacy firms. Legacy firms. He meant us. He meant me. I leaned back in my chair, stunned not by the scope of it, but by the recklessness. This wasn't just a side hustle or a misguided passion project. Mason had been building a competing real estate brand from inside the company. And worse, his entire strategy depended on tanking Silver Pine's assets just long enough to buy them out at a reduced value. I didn't waste time. I sent the documents to Samantha Rhodes, my attorney and former college roommate. She had a sharp mind for corporate fraud and zero tolerance for ego-driven cover-ups. By the next day, she'd unearthed even more: a fully built investor pitch deck distributed to at least 7 venture capital firms in the last 18 months. One of them, a former Silver Pine funding partner. The deck stated, in writing, that ML Vision Development planned to acquire distressed properties held by outdated family-run REITs in the Southwest, specifically naming locations in Chandler, Tempe, and Scottsdale. It listed Mason's role at Silver Pine as former chief strategy officer, which was bold considering he was still, legally, the CEO. And then came the final blow. A letter of intent dated just 2 weeks before my termination, proposing a friendly acquisition of Silver Pine's Gilbert Crossings project by ML. Vision pending aboard approved divestiture. He hadn't just fired me. He'd tried to erase me. From the company. From the records. From the brand itself. I remember just sitting in my home office, holding that letter. My grandfather's blueprint of our first property in Chandler hung behind me, a framed symbol of everything our family had built over 2 generations. And here was Mason, stripping it down to flip for equity and a glossy rebrand. Later that evening, Samantha called. "You need to decide how far you want to take this," she said. I didn't hesitate. All the way. The next morning, I received a surprise call from Harvey Denham, one of our longest-serving board members and a former business partner of my father's. He spoke slowly, carefully. "I've seen the lease renewals, and I've also seen the rumors about ML Vision. Are they true?" "They're not rumors," I said. "I have the documents. He's using Silver Pine's market intelligence to build his chain. And he planned to sell the company's most valuable properties to himself at a loss." Harvey was quiet for a beat. Then, "There's a board meeting next Friday. I think you should come." He didn't say more. He didn't have to. I had known for a while that Mason's ambition was bigger than his integrity, but I didn't realize how far he'd go. Not just to remove me from the equation, but to rewrite the entire legacy of Silver Pine Realty Group with his name etched across the top in a bold, modern font. What Mason didn't understand was that legacies aren't made with branding. They're built on foundations. And I owned his. I didn't go to the board meeting. Instead, I booked a last-minute flight to New York City. I met with someone I'd quietly stayed in touch with over the years, Dominic Shaw, CEO of Colbridge Urban Development, a national player in commercial and mixed-use properties. We'd crossed paths at an industry summit in San Diego 5 years earlier. He'd tried to poach me, then offered me a blank check and a penthouse office in their Chicago branch. I'd declined out of loyalty to Silver Pine. Loyalty that, in hindsight, had been painfully one-sided. Dominic greeted me in his corner office, overlooking Central Park. The mid-50s, sharp suit, even sharper instincts. "I've been hearing rumblings," he said, pouring us coffee. "Something about Silver Pine's internal drama, and something about you owning the ground their CEO forgot to check." "Not just forgot," I said. "He never thought it mattered." "Oh." I laid out everything briefly, cleanly, with no emotion. The leases, the expiring contracts, the investor deck from Mason's side hustle, the attempted backdoor acquisition, and finally, the offer. Colbridge could acquire the buildings once Silver Pine's board voted to sell. On one condition, I'd retain land ownership and offer long-term, below-market lease terms. "I want job security for the staff," I said. "Everyone, from site managers to porters, no layoffs. And you keep Carlos in Mesa. That man's held that property together with duct tape and grit." Dominic didn't blink. "Fair," he said. "But why not just jack up the rents and let Mason drown?" I stared out at the skyline for a moment. "Because this isn't about revenge. It's about rebuilding something that deserves to survive even if the name on the letterhead changes." Dominic nodded slowly. "That's rare. Most people in your position want to set fires. You're planting foundations." I handed him the deal packet. He flipped through it while sipping his coffee. "This fits our Southwest expansion strategy perfectly. We'll move fast." Over the next 72 hours, his legal and acquisitions teams prepared offers for properties in Chandler, Tempe, North Scottsdale, and Gilbert. Meanwhile, I reached out to key Silver Pine staff quietly and personally. I didn't promise them anything yet, but I asked them to hang tight, not to jump ship. Help was coming. It didn't take long for the rumor mill to ignite. A Phoenix real estate blog published a story titled, "Is Silver Pine looking to offload its flagships? Sources say national firm circling properties." The article mentioned Colbridge by name. Mason's response was immediate and loud. A company-wide email. "There are no plans to sell any Silver Pine properties. The rumors are baseless. Silver Pine remains strong, forward-facing, and 100% independent." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. That night, my father called. He sounded exhausted. "He knows you met with Coleridge," he said. "He's furious. Thinks you're trying to take the company down." "I'm trying to save what's left," I replied. Another long pause. "He says you're undermining everything we built." "No, Dad. He already did that. I'm just making sure something still stands when it's over." Dominic's team sent the official offers the next morning. All above market value. All with employment protections. All ready to close in under 30 days. Mason had no idea what was coming next. He thought he buried me. But all he did, I cleared the land for my next build. 1 week after the offers were submitted, I walked into Silver Pine's downtown Phoenix headquarters for the first time since being fired. The air inside the glass and steel building was cold and clinical, stripped of the warmth that had once defined our family business. Even the front desk receptionist, who used to greet me with a hug and a joke, avoided eye contact as I signed in. The boardroom was on the 16th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the skyline, casting hard morning light across the long oak table. I recognized every face. There were 7 voting members: Harvey Denham, Monica Liu, Aaron Castillo, Valerie Brooks, Marcus Ng, my father, and of course Mason, seated at the head of the table in a navy suit, 2 shades too bold for someone under pressure. He didn't rise when I entered, just glared. "Let's be clear about what this meeting is," he said, voice clipped. "My brother is attempting a hostile takeover of the company our family built." "Incorrect," I replied calmly, sitting at the opposite end. "I'm exercising my rights as a property owner. Coleridge is negotiating to purchase buildings. Silver Pine no longer wishes to maintain based on the terms you signed, and leases you ignored." Monica leaned forward. "The board never approved a property sale." "Because you were presented with incomplete information," I said, sliding thick black folders across the table, each labeled with the board member's name. "These documents show that while serving as CEO of Silver Pine, Mason Lowell simultaneously built a competing company, ML, Vision Development LLC, and actively pursued the acquisition of Silver Pine's assets for personal gain." The room fell silent. Only the quiet shuffle of pages being flipped. Then came the inhale. Sharp. Audible. Valerie's brow furrowed as she pulled out a printed email, time-stamped, outlining Mason's letter of intent to purchase Gilbert Crossings under the guise of legacy divestiture. My father, now 72, wearing a tired gray suit and eyes that had seen far too many boardrooms, opened his folder. As he read, his face lost what little color it had left. "This is absurd," Mason blurted. "ML Vision is a conceptual consulting entity. There are no active developments." I didn't blink. "There are permit applications in North Scottsdale, South Tempe, and Santan Village. All are filed under ML Vision. All are using Silver Pine's market data. And your investor deck clearly states your intention to acquire distressed real estate from outdated family REITs in the Phoenix metro area." Mason's jaw clenched. "This is an ambush." "No," Harvey Denham said quietly. "This is overdue." Aaron, ever the quiet analyst, looked up from his folder. "Mason, did you disclose any of this to the board?" "I didn't think it was necessary," Mason snapped. "That's the definition of necessary," Valerie muttered, still reading. My father turned to him, voice brittle. "Is it true? Did you plan to buy the properties we built at a loss to feed your side business?" Mason didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. I cleared my throat. "Coleridge's offer includes employment protections, above market valuations, and a timeline that ensures continuity. It saves Silver Pine from internal decay and external litigation. What you do next is up to you. But the land underneath Chandler, Gilbert, North Scottsdale, and Tempe? That's not negotiable. I own it." Mason laughed, a hollow, frantic sound. "You can't just come in here and dictate terms. You're not even on the board anymore." "No," I said, "but I'm still part of this legacy, and you're not above it." There was a long pause. Then Marcus Ng spoke up for the first time. "I move that we accept Coleridge's offer, Pending legal review. Harvey seconded. Valerie and Monica both raised their hands. All in favor? Aaron asked. 5 hands went up. Opposed? Only Mason. My father abstained. He sat motionless, looking at nothing. Mason stood abruptly, shoving his chair back. You think you've won? Do you think this is over? Coalbridge will gut this company. You just signed away your legacy. No, I said softly. You tried to sell it out from under us. I just saved what I could. He stormed out, slamming the glass door so hard the blinds rattled. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Harvey turned to me. The board will be formally requesting Mason's resignation tomorrow. We'll need interim leadership during the transition. I'm not interested, I said. My part in this is done. Valerie tilted her head. Why not? You're the obvious choice. And because I don't need a title to lead. It'll help with the transition, but Silver Pine's future should be in new hands, someone who understands the foundation. Aaron nodded. That's the first time I've heard the word foundation in this room all year. We all chuckled. Lightly, almost sadly. I stood, collected my portfolio, and nodded toward my father. I hope you come back from this. He looked at me, eyes glassy. So do I. As I walked out of the boardroom, past the receptionist, who finally looked up and gave me the faintest smile, I didn't feel triumph. I felt clarity. Something broken had been set right, not out of vengeance but necessity. Mason had tried to brand himself as the future, but he never understood the weight of legacy. And now that he was gone, I wasn't interested in replacing him. I was interested in rebuilding everything he tried to erase one piece of land at a time. 1 year later, the Chandler Heights residences, formerly owned by Silver Pine, stood proudly under new management as part of Coalbridge's Southwest collection. The signage had changed, but the soul hadn't. Carlos was still running maintenance. The front desk smelled like fresh citrus, and the community garden I'd helped design in 2016 had been expanded and renamed in honor of my grandfather. I didn't take an executive role. Instead, I became a strategic development advisor across Coalbridge's Arizona portfolio. Quiet work behind the scenes, exactly where I belonged. I worked out of a small office in Gilbert, filled with blueprints, folded site plans, and a single photo of my parents in front of our first project when the company was still called Lowell & Sons Realty. Silver Pine still existed, downsized, reorganized, and now under a new CEO, Monica Liu, one of the few who had stood up in that boardroom. She reached out often for guidance, and I gave it freely. Because, in the end, this was never about revenge. It was about preserving the parts of our legacy that deserve to outlive ego. Mason? He'd vanished from the public eye. Last I heard, he consulted for a mid-sized property firm in Nevada. No headlines, no ribbon cuttings. But the most unexpected moment came at my father's home in Paradise Valley at Thanksgiving. The entire family was there, including Mason. It was tense at first, a few glances, a few long silences. But my nieces, his daughters, ran up like nothing had changed, pulling me to the backyard to see the treehouse I'd helped build years earlier. And for a while, it felt human again, real. Not boardrooms or leverage or leases. Just family, finally sitting at the same table. Before dessert, Dad raised a glass and said, "To the ones who built the foundation and the ones who never forgot what held it all up." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. That was enough. People think the worst part is getting fired, but that's not true. The worst part is being erased, being told that everything you built, every late night, every sacrifice, suddenly doesn't matter because someone with a louder voice or a shinier title decided they saw the future better than you ever could. But here's what I've learned. Foundations don't shout, they don't trend. They don't chase validation, they hold, quietly, steadily. When Mason pushed me out, I could have fought back with noise. Public statements, retaliation, ego. But instead, I let silence do what noise. Never could I let it reveal what was real. I didn't need to destroy him. I just needed to protect what mattered: the land, the people, and the legacy. And in doing that, I discovered something no title could offer: clarity, power without posture, leadership without needing to be seen. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or replaced, don't waste energy proving yourself to those who won't listen. Build anyway. Invest in things no one else sees coming. Choose structure over spectacle. And most importantly, never tie your worth to a role someone else can revoke. Because when the dust settles, and it always does, it won't be the flashiest name that stands. It'll be the one that is built for the long haul, the one who laid the foundation. So lay yours well. Quietly, if you must, but make it undeniable. That's how you win and never have to say a word.